And hello, everybody. 1 week to go in the regular season and a ton of things yet to be decided. We'll try to hit as many of those as we can tonight. The last set of regional rankings before the playoffs will be released tomorrow. What will they look like? We'll predict the way they should look. Some notable career milestones were reached this past weekend. We'll touch on those as well. That and a lot more tonight on Inside D2 Football with Chuck Bittner, Matt Witwicky, Chris Ferguson, Tony Nicolette, Justin Polizzi. I'm Brandon Meisner. Thank you for joining us. David Albertson is out tonight. Last week, we had a crazy week in Super Region 1. This week, Super Region 2 stole the limelight, and that is the region in which we will start this week. And we will start with West Georgia's incredible come from behind 52-42 win over Delta State. And it was a game that Delta State was in control. If you had one of the win calculators or win trackers, the percentage must have been high, but the Wolves figured out a way to get it done in the end.
Yeah, if you were keeping track of that game and you were surprised when you saw the final score, I certainly can't blame you, because I was watching that game kind of in the background while I was doing some other things, and the flow of that game was really kind of very much in line with what I expected and probably with what a lot of people expected. Delta State was up by multiple scores for large stretches of that game. It was, for most parts, it was about a 10 to 11 point spread. They got it up to as much as 18 points in the third quarter. They're up by 18 points in the fourth quarter. They're up by 18 with about 11 minutes to go. And then all of a sudden, here comes West Georgia. They just completely turned the game around, and they ended up scoring 4 touchdowns to close out that game, and just absolutely shocked the home crowd, shocked Delta State, shocked me. I just didn't think they really had it in them to come from behind like that. So just incredible performance from West Georgia. But I mean, it has to be said, a little bit of a fourth quarter collapse there from Delta State. When you have an 18-point lead at home with the top seed on the region and on the line, you have to win. You got to finish. You have to win that game. So a lot of learning experiences to take away from that from Delta State, and for West Georgia. You know, I thought this was probably going to be the game that would really eliminate them from the discussion permanently in Super Region 2. And I think that this now puts them back in play. We'll look at the projections here in a little bit, but I think this puts them back into play because of the quality of this win and how well they played. Harrison Frost had over 500 yards passing in this game. So, you know, he just really carved up that Delta State defense in the fourth quarter. So, yeah, they overcame some adversity too. You know, there were a couple plays where they looked like they were going to get down into the red zone to maybe kick the field goal to tie and get the game into overtime. Huge penalty that set them back. They overcame that and then ended up scoring to win the game in the last couple seconds. So just quite a remarkable game. Not something that I saw coming as we got into the fourth quarter of that game at all, and a huge shakeup in Super Region 2.
And Chuck, I think it speaks to the grit of that West Georgia team, though. You're down, like you said, 18 points with 11 minutes left in the game, and you come back and win that game on the road. Talk about a gritty win and just doing all the things that you need to do right now, 2 weeks before the playoffs start.
You know what, Chuck, in addition to that, what's funny is I saw an interview this morning with Pete Chinnick, the head coach of West Florida, and he had turned the game off before their night contest last night with Valdosta, because he thought that game was over with. So it's kind of funny. I mean, it speaks to, just how everybody ended up looking at that game and how it looked like Delta had that in the hand, and then it just turned late.
Yep.
Right. It was obviously a great comeback win for West Georgia after it looked like Delta State was going to be the number 1 seed in that region, Super Region. We'll look at that in a little bit, but we're not so sure that will be the case now. Moving on to another game that was impactful in Super Region 2. Newberry, the most impossible team to predict, comes away with a 24-15 win over Wingate. Wingate was ranked number 21 in our poll. They were ranked number 3 in the Super Region, and Newberry was able to come away with the win in that one.
I'm glad everybody else is starting to see how difficult it's been to predict Newberry games, because I had 5 years of this impossible task, because sometimes they lose games you don't think that they're going to lose, but then they also win games that you don't think that they're going to win. And not that they were, a prohibitive underdog coming into this game. They've certainly had their success in the conference, and they've had their success over Wingate. But I thought the Wingate defense was going to control this game. And to an extent, they did. This was a game where if I gave you the final stat sheet and took the scores off of it and just said, tell me which team won the game, most people would say that Wingate won that game. Wingate had the ball for 43 minutes in this contest. They had well over 400 yards of offense. Newberry had something around 260, and most of that was just rushing of Mario Anderson. So they ended up being very one-dimensional, which we thought Wingate would be able to do to them. So when you kind of looked at the way the game played out, it kind of looked like it was playing towards Wingate's strengths, and that's how they would win the game. But to Newberry's credit, they played great red zone defense. They forced field goal attempts instead of giving up touchdowns. And then really the biggest play in the game was that they got a special teams touchdown on a blocked field goal that went back the other way. And I think that was really what kind of swung the momentum in Newberry's favor, on Wingate's home field, and really just allowed them to get a lead that they never gave up. So that's just how it's been with these teams in the SAC the last couple of years. It's been a very difficult league to predict.
All right. Let's go ahead and move on. Mars Hill and Tusculum, a game that impacts regional rankings. A 34-27 win by Mars Hill over Tusculum. You were at the game, Justin. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it was a game that you knew was going to be a back and forth contest, and actually the score. I think the score on the scoreboard showed that the game may have been a little closer than it really was. I felt like Mars Hill pretty much controlled that game from the start. They did a great job running the football with Trevon Newton, and they were able to get established a run early, and Tusculum really didn't have an answer for it, and then they were able to get into play action off the run, and they hit some big shots down the field. And the Mars Hill defense did a great job. They controlled Trey Simmons. He scrambled around a lot and just overthrew receivers deep downfield. There was 3 to 4 balls. He just overthrew his receivers by 10 to 12 yards. And so they did a great job. He would scramble, and they did a great job getting him down for a loss, if not, maybe 1 or 2 yards on a pickup, and really held him in check for the most part in the day. So it was a good team win for Mars Hill. And for Tusculum, they've been explosive offensively all year, and we just didn't see it yesterday. They just didn't hit those big plays. Like I said, Trey Simmons just overshot his receivers on a couple balls, and they just couldn't break away in the open field like you thought they might be able to. So it was a good win for Mars Hill at home. They had a great crowd there, and so it was a great game. And like I said, a great win. But really, it was a great South Atlantic Conference game, especially in that Mountain Division.
Right. That some other results from Super Region 2. Benedict wins 54-21 over Allen, Virginia. Union wins. Tusculum, Marcel, we already touched on. Tuskegee beats Miles by 3. Albany State Falls, they were the number 8 seed coming into this week. Limestone wins over Barton, and Fayetteville State over Winston-Salem. So a crazy weekend in Super Region 2. A lot of losses, maybe not the same kind of insanity or same level of insanity that we saw last week in Super Region 1, but nonetheless, it was a pretty interesting week in Super Region 2. Let's go ahead and move to Super Region 4. We're going to start there with a game in the Northern Sun. A game featuring unranked teams in our poll, but absolutely important in the Super Region 4 Super Rankings. Sioux Falls was number 5. Wayne State was number 6. And Wayne State on the road was able to come away with a 31-24 victory.
I'm muted. So
yes, you are. Yes, sir.
I'm muted, guys. Yeah. But no, real even game between the two squads. Thurl Reisdorfer playing for Sioux Falls, dinged up, but he was still effective, went over 100 yards, few scores. But Nick Bone, I should say, the quarterback for Wayne State, was still able to make some nice plays with his feet and hurt Sioux Falls down the field in the back half of the contest. Here's a block punt, that Sioux Falls is able to get and sets them up for a score. USF had some trouble scoring in the back half of the contest while Wayne State kind of kept going. And all of a sudden, you got the feeling that Wayne State could pull this upset. And, they did a really nice job, Wayne State did, with not kind of having a lot of self-inflicted wounds with penalties specifically. And you can see Nick Bone going on the long run here, running past pretty much the whole USF football team. And this is why he's one of the best, quarterbacks in the conference, frankly. He and Brandon Alt up at Bemidji. And he's able to hit a receiver in the end zone here. And it kind of, all of a sudden, things really had turned for Sioux Falls at this point. They had a lot of penalties in the back half of the game. They had a few on their bench for instigating and things like that, and really made the football game hard for Sioux Falls to come back late in the contest. And it was a real rough way for USF to kind of get notched with their third straight loss. And at the same time, a huge win for Wayne, which may even boost them into the conversation for maybe even having a home game upcoming in the playoffs, Brandon.
That would be, at least in my evaluation, a pretty significant step for them, because John McMenamin took over last year,
Right.
had them headed in the right direction, leaves. And then, you got a new coaching staff, or I guess not really a new coaching staff, certainly a new head coach, but goodness gracious, Wayne's not one of the blue bloods of D2, but they have everything going in the right direction. It'd be pretty remarkable for them to have a home game, much less just make the playoffs.
Absolutely, yes.
All right, let's look at some. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, guys. Did you say? I'm sorry. I heard something with my horrible hearing that was not actually there. Let me go ahead and get the rest of the Super Region 4 results. Angelo State won. Central Washington was the 10 seed. Angelo State wins that one. Although Central Washington battled and was in that game the entire way and actually controlled it for a little bit of it. Colorado Mines a 56-16 win over New Mexico Highlands. Winona State wins big. Minnesota State wins big. Bemidji State 24-14 over Northern. A&M Kingsville, is that the third in a row that they've suffered? The third loss in a row? Okay. They lose 41-37 to Midwestern State. And Minnesota Duluth wins 34-24 over the 9 seed Augustana. But it is possible that Augustana is still not out of the running. We will see when we get to the regional rankings. Let's go ahead and move to Super Region 3. The big game there was supposed to be the middle of Davenport's 3-game losing streak, but they had different thoughts on that. After winning last week, they faced Ferris State. It was a number 5 versus number 19 in the country matchup. Davenport was the 5 seed. Ferris was a 3 seed, and Ferris State won this game 28-7.
Yeah, in this game, we've given Davenport a hard time maybe a little bit throughout most of the season. You just referred to it. Hey, this is supposed to be the middle of their 3-game losing streak.
Right.
But this was the first game in that sequence that looked a lot more like maybe what we had thought. I mean, yeah, it was 28-7, but the score indicates a game that was closer than it really was. I mean, Ferris ran for 294 yards in this game and did pretty much what they wanted to. Offensively, they did mix. Carson Gulker got the start at quarterback, but Malik Mitchell saw plenty of time in this game, trying to work him back in from his injury that he's been dealing with all year. But I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, Ferris was moving the ball virtually at will. They had two fumbles in Davenport territory, one inside the 10 in the first half. I think the real story of this game is more so what Ferris's defense did to Davenport's offense. Jason Whitaker just never looked settled, other than a really good drive that the Panthers had coming out of the locker room in the third quarter to get the second half started. They really didn't have a lot of success moving the ball throughout the day, and they were held under 200 yards of offense for the game. So that looked a lot more to form, I think, than what we had been thinking it would. So even though the score wasn't super lopsided, the game really was. Ferris had pretty good control of it throughout.
I agree. And, Gulker was the guy who had those 2 fumbles in the first half, I think, Tony.
Yeah, he was.
And it was there. It's obviously, at least it looks like to me, and I don't know the entire injury situation, but it looks to me as though they're trying to develop a 1-2 with Mitchell and Gulker. Is that the way you're looking at it?
Well, that's where they are at the moment. Yeah. But again, Tony Anise has never been shy about using 1-2s throughout his tenure. Now, when he's had Jason Vanderlons, okay, maybe not so much. But over the last couple of years, we've seen a fair amount of that. I mean, even when they had Bernhardt last year, Malik Mitchell played a ton. I mean, that was not an uncommon thing. So, and we saw Evan Cummins a whole bunch over the last stretch. And even last week when they didn't have Mitchell or Cummins, Gulker started the game up at Northern, and Rivera played the whole second half. So, I mean, that's what they're going to look to do anyway. So that's not really anything particularly noteworthy, at least not in my opinion.
All right. In the other games in Super Region 3, there was really kind of a ho-hum week. Not much change. Grand Valley wins. Pitt State wins. Washita Baptist wins. Truman State had an impressive 52-7 win over McKendree, I thought. Indianapolis wins. Harding wins. Emporia State wins. Northwest Missouri wins. And I don't think we'll see that much change in the super regional rankings there. In Super Region 1, all the craziness happened last week. So there wasn't like a big outcome or a big game to talk about. Looking at the game, Shepherd wins. Ashland wins. IUP wins, Assumption wins, Slippery Rock wins, Notre Dame wins, Gannon wins, New Haven. That was the only loss. Bentley fell to American International 18-10. That would be the only one that could be considered an upset. And Concord beats Alderson Broadus. But Chuck, I think things went the way we thought they would go, didn't they?
Well, a little bit of an upset there with Bentley losing to a winless American International, a team that's they've had a couple games where they were able to contend a little bit. For the most part, it's just not a good football team this year. So for Bentley to throw away their hopes of the postseason, losing to American International is that'd be pretty tough to take. But everything else pretty much went to form. I think the thing that was most interesting to me going into the weekend was that we had this 3-way tie in the PSAC West Division with IUP, Slippery Rock, and Gannon. And it was going to be really interesting to see how that was going to shake out, because if all three of those teams won, you're going to have a 3-way tiebreaker, which favored IUP. If 2 of those teams won and 1 lost, then it was going to come down to the head-to-head between the 2 teams that won. So as it turned out, they did finish in a 3-way tie. And they had to go down to the 3rd tiebreaker in their criteria to eliminate one of those 3 teams. Gannon was the first team eliminated. Then it goes to head-to-head IUP and Slippery Rock. So IUP is going to go to the championship game. Yep. So that was actually what I was looking forward to the most. But it turned out there was actually no drama at all because they all won.
All right. All right. So that'll wrap up what happened yesterday as far as the teams go. In some other news, Tyson Bagent had broke the career record for touchdown passes in Division II. He now has 151. The mark was 148, held by Jimmy Terwilliger. And again, as we talked about last week, it was pretty cool that Terwilliger was the opposing coach in this game to see his record get surpassed. And
took some nice photos after the game to commemorate that and celebrate it. It was pretty cool.
I didn't see them. That's awesome. I didn't see that. So apparently Tyson is also 6 touchdowns shy of the all division record for him. So anyway, he's had a great career. I feel so in some ways that Tyson this year is experiencing some of the Jordan rules, where he's been so good that we don't talk about him very much because it's like he has to throw for like 600 yards and 10 touchdowns for us to be impressed, you know.
Well, that's the thing is, like when we've talked about Harlan Hill and who the candidates are, Tyson Bagent's not just competing against the field, he's competing against 2021 Tyson Bagent.
Right, exactly. So TJ Cole, Washita Baptist, set the Washita record for rushing touchdowns career. Dalton Hatley at Southeastern Oklahoma, he's now their all-time leading passer. Joshua Pryor at Bowie State is now the all-time leader in tackles for loss in Division II. So great player. Glad he stuck around. And one other note, Shane Zylstra, who was a great player for Minnesota State, caught a touchdown today for the Lions. Is that his first career touchdown, Whit?
I believe it is, and Adam Thielen also caught one. So 2 Mankato wideouts, leave D2 and go to the NFL and catch a touchdown today.
It's just that easy, isn't it? So
right.
All right. All right. All right. We're going to touch on and look at the regional rankings next. Before we do, want to recognize some of the people who support us and make this possible. If you are so inclined, we would all appreciate your support. That can come in the financial means by going to d2football.com/support. It could also be sharing anything that we do and spreading the word about what we do. You are our marketing department. Before we run this, I wanted to let Nathan B, Johnson M, and Charles A know that we appreciate their support, even though we have yet, or it falls on me, I have yet to update the video to recognize them. But in any case, we appreciate those, you three new supporters, and we appreciate all of these folks who have supported us for a very long time. Just wanted to take this opportunity to thank those who have supported D2 Football this year. D2 Football is free, but it isn't cheap. Your support helps offset our expenses and allows us to expand our coverage. If you like what we're doing, please consider supporting us. Visit d2football.com/support. Or if you want to do it the old-fashioned way, click contact on the website to find our mailing address. But again, thank you for supporting D2 Football. All right, and now we are at the point of the show that I think everybody looks forward to the most. This has got to be the most exciting week. Before we get into this, do you guys think that week 10 or week 11 is always the most exciting week with everything going on?
Or week 1,
Yeah.
but yeah.
That was my other thought. It was the very first
Yeah.
week with great non-conference games, and this week.
Yeah,
Totally.
I start to feel like a little bit of a sense of relief too, because we put so much into trying to
Yes.
figure out how all this is going to play out, and then you finally, because we go through all these exercises where we talk about the rankings and all the games that are going to be played, but we always have to say this can all still change by the time we get to week 11. So when we get to week 11,
Right.
then we can finally just say, all right, we're finally going to play all the games, and then we'll see how this shakes out.
Well, and that's
Totally.
why in my column, I've always said I won't touch it. I've had people email me, hey, when are you going to give us some insight on I won't touch it till the column before week 11. So this will be the only week that I'll write about it, because it just so much changes at week 7, 8, 9, 10. You just can't do it.
All right, let's go ahead and look at the Super Region rankings. We're going to do them in order. We're going to start with Super Region 1, just because we have OCD and have to go 1, 2, 3, 4. As we said, not a lot changed though.
Well, we got a yellow column that's changed.
Oh, great point. We let me explain that. Thank you, Matt. We have ranked these in the way that we believe they will be predicted. If you see the column where you see ID2, that means inside D2, and our staff, mostly about 99.9%, Chuck and Matt, have evaluated these, and we think they've done a good enough job and have really honestly dominated the rankings so well. We ranked them by our own internal rankings rather than using ink blots solely. You still see inks on there, but there's a comparison now. And if the playoffs were to start next week, we believe 1 through 7 would be Shepherd, Ashland, IUP, Assumption, Slippery Rock, Notre Dame, and Gannon. So Matt and Chuck, you guys do these, and let's speak to the rankings of Super Region 1.
Yeah, I'll let Chuck jump in, and I'll just kind of touch on anything after that.
So first of all, we're representing this as what we think the committee is likely to do. We kind of have our own thoughts and opinions on where some of these teams would land, but this is the one that through 10 that we expect to see from the committee when the rankings come out tomorrow. Shepherd is a clear number 1 because they are the only undefeated team in the region. Well, you can see with where they're at with strength of schedules, if they would happen to lose that championship game to IUP, now they're going to get a nice bump in strength of schedule, but they're a bit on the low side of the teams that are kind of in play here. So if they do lose that game, there's an opportunity for them to slide down a couple of places. But for now, they're the clear number 1. We are projecting Ashland, IUP, Assumption, Slippery Rock as the remaining of the top 5. It's going to be really easy for the committee to just stick with what they had last week. They really don't have to make any changes here, and we don't think that they will. However, if you kind of look at those last 2 columns, Assumption on line number 4, Inkblot has them projected at number 2. And I actually, the first time I took a pass at this morning, I have Assumption as number 2 as well. I do not think that the committee will move them up to number 2 again, because they really don't need to. I don't think that they will. But when you look at the strength of schedule, the winning percentage is a little bit lower because they have fewer countable games, but they have 4 wins over teams that are over 500. The performance indicator is a little bit of an advantage to them, and they do have a win over a ranked opponent. So I think there would be justification to move Assumption all the way up to number 2. I just don't think that it's likely to happen when the committee releases their rankings. So I think you're looking at a pretty good, solid playoff field here. Now, New Haven still has life, and Concord still has life as well. Frostburg State is a team that we're thinking we will see in the rankings at 10th. Unlikely to be a factor whether they're there or not. There's a couple of other teams that might take that 10 spot, but at this point, it really doesn't seem like it's going to be relevant who's down there in that position. So I think what you're looking at here on the page, the 7 of the 10 teams you're looking at will make up the playoff field. Frankly, I will be not shocked if it's the 7 teams that you see in that order right now. There may be some shifting depending on the outcome of the PSAC championship game. Another big game that's still to come, Slippery Rock is hosting Kutztown. Kutztown should have been the obvious choice to backfill the spot vacated by Bentley, but they blew it and lost by 19 points at home to Westchester. So they're pretty much out of the picture here. So I think it's very likely that the 7 teams you see 1 through 7 will probably be the playoff field that we'll see a week from now.
Chuck, in addition to that, I think the thing that we kind of joked around last week that with each super region, there was one team where we could kind of put highlighter on while we're going ahead and trying to figure out which is the one that's hardest to land on the page. And I think Assumption's that one here because, if you take a look at them side by side with Ashland, they, as you mentioned, their SOS is better, but they have 1 less game played. They're almost a virtual tie in 500 or better. It's just that Ashland has a little bit better in those fields and regional ranking, but they have a lower PI. So it's kind of like back and forth a little bit. I think you could probably go either way there. And I'm not sure it's going to make a huge difference when it really comes to the playoffs, as long as both those teams are in the top 4, because they're both going to have a home game. So, but I think that's Assumption's the one that really stood out to me as the one that was hardest to figure where they would land.
Clearly. Yep. Agree.
So I got a question here, because 5, 6, and 7 are the teams that are traveling. Which of 5, 6, or 7 is going to have to do a potential rematch with IUP?
Well, the big variable there is what's the outcome of the PSAC championship going to be? And if IUP loses that game, where do they slot in? Because maybe they end up being one of those 5, 6, or 7 teams if they lose to Shepherd. So that's probably still the big variable here. I'm sure IUP would love to get another shot at Gannon, but we'll see how it all shakes out.
Chuck, wouldn't that almost move up Slippery Rock? I know that they have a head-to-head loss, don't they, right there? But IUP would have 2 losses, which would seemingly put them in that back half conversation, wouldn't it? And wouldn't that kind of potentially kind of toy things a little bit here?
They do have, IUP does have the head-to-head advantage on Slippery Rock, but for the most part, what we see is that's a really important factor when records are equal. And if IUP has an additional loss, then that tends to many times kind of offset that head-to-head result. So I think it would be very possible at that point, Whit, that you would see Slippery Rock move up ahead of IUP. I would also say, just historically, we have seen that the results of the PSAC championship game, the winner and loser tend to come out of that still in pretty good shape. Because a lot of times you're getting a very good SOS bump. I mean, IUP is going to play a 10-0 football team, so they're going to get a really nice SOS bump. So even if they drop that contest and go to 8-2, you're still going to have a really good-looking resume. But it probably does put them into territory where they're going to have to travel instead of hosting a game.
Yeah,
and that's a big thing to note too, Chuck. Because I mean, if you really stop and think about it, that IUP Shepherd game, and that's for the 1 seed, because both those teams are going to have better resumes than Ashland.
Yep.
I think yes, I agree. I agree. Yep.
All right.
So it's a difference between potentially having a week off and then a home game, or having to hit the road the next week. I mean, for IUP anyway, I would think Shepherd might not fall that far, but IUP.
What Matt and Chuck, or anybody who wants to, frankly, chime in. We're looking at the record versus 500. Would that contradict or counteract what Tony just said?
It could be a bit of a concern because IUP doesn't have many results there. I think, though, I think what Tony's probably getting at is that their SOS is going to take a pretty good bump right there just from playing Shepherd alone. And it would probably put them in a pretty favorable spot right there because then they would be all of a sudden in the versus regional ranked teams all the way to the right. Mm-hmm. They would have 2 wins in that column where no one else does. So I think that would put them in a pretty favorable spot. Chuck, I realize that this is kind of, we're doing hypothetical here, but what are your thoughts about that scenario?
Well, and that wins over ranked opponents, I think, has possibly not been as important in Super Region 1 as it has been in some of the other Super Regions where they really have a hard time differentiating some of those teams because, like in your region and Super Region 4, but we have all these NSIC teams that all have the same damn record. And they're going to have the same strength of schedule. They really do have to look at some of those other things to try to differentiate these teams. I haven't seen a ton of evidence that that's used as much in Super Region 1, but it's definitely something that the committee can look at if they really want to put a lot of emphasis on IUP beating the team that we certainly perceive to be the best in the region.
Right.
It kind of gives them some license to do that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Interesting. All right. Let's move on to Super Region 2, guys. I'm going to pull this down and share the Super Region 2 information. Give me 1 second. All right. Super Region 2, as you see it, we have them ordered in this manner: Benedict, Delta State, West Florida, Wingate, Virginia Union, Fort Valley, and Mars Hill would be the top 7. Ferg, what are your thoughts when you look at this right now?
Well, I mean, West Georgia really threw a wrench in everything here because now you kind of see Benedict as the only undefeated team in Super Region 2, very similar to Super Region 1 and Super Region 4. You kind of have that, and that kind of seems to offset the strength of schedule for Benedict, although they will get a nice bump playing Tuskegee in the SIAC championship game. Beyond that, what's kind of interesting is you kind of have like Wingate at number 4, despite having 2 losses. Mm-hmm. Fort Valley came out of nowhere now. They weren't in this discussion last week, and now they're at 6. And a lot of that has to do with, Albany, having a really good record and them able to leapfrog them. So, a couple of things here. Tuskegee at 8, again, they're playing Benedict for the SIAC championship game. So it is basically playoff time for them. Yeah. Win and you're in. The SAC championship game is also another one that's going to play a big factor here. And what I really haven't talked about is the CIAA, because you've got the 2 teams that are in the championship game. They're not in this ranking. Right. And Fayetteville State's kind of like, on the cusp once again. They were in this poll last time, but they're on the cusp. And, they're playing a Trowan team that they've already beaten. So not really much to gain from there. And I think that's, kind of hurts a little bit. But, really this seems to be more of the year of the South Atlantic and the SIAC more than anything coming out of Super Region 2 so far.
Hey, Ferg, when Chuck and I were looking at this morning, we had a hard time wrapping our head around where Tuskegee should land. And I think the reason why is because you look at their SOS. They haven't played a team with a winning record since the opening week of the season. And it's hard not to go, but then, like you mentioned, I mean, whether they're on the 8 line, frankly, Ferg, whether they're on the 9 or the 10, if they beat Benedict, they're going to get their way in. I think, obviously we're not forecasting what all the other math's going to look like, but at the same time, we had a hard time figuring them because they have a little bit lower PI. They don't have almost anything that you can go by versus 500 or better or regionally ranked opponents. As you're looking at this, are you kind of seeing some of that same thing, or what's your take?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think a lot of that is just a factor of the way that the SIAC has the divisions. And, their side of the divisions just doesn't have much in terms of strength.
Sure.
So really they are very hard to rank. They're basically in the same spot that Fayetteville State has found themselves in year after year.
Right.
And quite honestly, I am a little surprised to kind of see them where they are. But again, 9-1, and they happen to be the undefeated team. It's going to be hard to keep them out at that point.
Absolutely. Chuck, you and I chatted earlier, and you and I were going back and forth about Fort Valley and Mars Hill, if my memory serves me correct. Because Mars Hill's all of a sudden parachuted in here. Last week they had a low SOS and they weren't in the conversation. And, Chuck, how would you characterize how we were looking at that Mars Hill versus Fort Valley? Because you can see we've got 6 and 7, Fort Valley and Mars Hill. Ink's got the opposite. I originally had Mars Hill, then I flipped. I was persuaded. Chuck persuaded me. But, how would you explain kind of how we're seeing that, Chuck?
Well, yes, Mars Hill was not ranked last week. They're going to be not only in the top 10, I think they're going to be in the top 7, which is what we're projecting here, which puts them solidly into the playoff field as of 10 games played. So that's a pretty big jump to go from off the page to potentially into the field. I don't think that they should be above Fort Valley. I think that there's a chance that they will be because of the 7-1 versus an 8-2. They've got fewer D2 losses, so I think that that's possible. I think Fort Valley should be at 6, and actually that was kind of the team in this region that sort of got my attention, because after they had lost to I think it was Savannah State, kind of wrote them off and thought it's probably going to blow it for them. But then they come back and they beat Albany, so that bumps Albany State out of the picture. And then the thing to remember about Fort Valley is that they have a head-to-head win over Tuskegee, which we kind of talked about. So that really puts them right into the thick of this. They've got a good chance here, and remember, their season's over, so they're already in the clubhouse for the year. So I think they've got a real chance. That was the team that I was really kind of curious about. I had them at 6, and I think you were thinking Mars Hill at 6, but I think with the resume that they have right now, I would go Fort Valley. Now, if Mars Hill is able to beat Newberry, that's going to be a really quality win. And so here's where these rankings can become really, really important. Because if you are Mars Hill or Limestone, you really want to see Newberry on the 10 line when this ranking comes out tomorrow. And the reason for that is now you've got to win over a team that is a ranked opponent. And Whit, make sure I don't misexplain this, but when we look at
regionally ranked, right? Not like polls or any of that, right?
So help me make sure that I explain this correctly, because when we get to the end of next week and we start looking at the playoff field, they're going to be looking at wins over ranked opponents. But remember, at that point, the ranked opponents would be through week 10. In other words,
no one's been ranked yet for that current week, right?
Correct. So in other words, the rankings that come out tomorrow. So if you're a team like Limestone or Mars Hill, you really want to see Newberry on that 10 line, because all of a sudden a victory over them becomes a win over a ranked opponent. And there's going to be lots of other scenarios like that. But that's why this is going to be real important to see who's actually in the field as of tomorrow.
I mean, it's a really inside baseball type of thing that we're talking about here, but at the same time, it's important because when you have two teams that look like they're a dead match, and then you look in that regionally ranked column, that's frankly some of why we have Wingate up where we do. You take a look at Wingate, took a defeat, but if you look past, you look at the fact that they're 8-2, you got Virginia Union 8-1. Strength of schedule though flips the other way. Then over 500 or better, Wingate's better. PI goes towards Virginia Union, but then that versus regionally ranked, that's the one we think could really come into play here because it's a noticeably different result. 3-0 versus 0-1. because I think that's the other one, Chuck, where you and I were kind of like you could flip a coin on Wingate versus Virginia Union in that 4 or 5 spot. I mean, now the thing as Ferg mentioned, Virginia Union's season is over. Wingate has a game, I think, against a team with like a 1 win against D2 opponents, Virginia Wise.
Yeah. Right.
So does Wingate's SOS all of a sudden plummet? And then are they at risk for not looking as good in this beauty contest? I think that's a real thing to keep an eye on.
And the other thing, Whit, is you're going back to what we're talking about with these wins over regionally ranked opponents. One of those 3 wins that you see for Wingate right now is Tusculum. I don't think Tusculum's going to be a ranked opponent tomorrow when the new rankings come out. So one of those wins is going to come off the board. So all of a sudden, Wingate's overall resume starts to depreciate.
I think, and that's kind of where if you hear us say things like we think that may be trending towards the playoffs, that's kind of what we're getting at here. Is it could be a case where Virginia Union may be trending up and Wingate more to that 5 line. But keep in mind what we're looking at right now is strictly for what's being released Monday, not what's literally after 11 weeks of competition.
I just got a quick question because you got Virginia Union with a regional ranked loss. So I don't think they've played anybody regionally ranked, except Ferris State, maybe.
Keep in mind it's from the previous week, so it would have been from last week's regional rankings at the time.
Sorry, which team were you talking about, Ferg?
Virginia Union.
That would have been Chowan. That's their only loss, and they haven't been in the rankings.
Okay, could be a typo error on my part too.
Yeah.
So that could be it. Okay.
Sorry.
No.
The 3-0 is the difference, right?
Yeah, the 3-0 makes a big difference there, and it's very borderline. And I mean, that's the difference between a home game and going on the road. I mean, that's how big this is.
I think it's something to definitely keep an eye on, no doubt about it.
All right, I fixed it, or it should be fixed. There you go. All right, so that data accurately reflects the current situation, then, right? Is that
Did
correct?
they not play Fayetteville State, Chris?
No,
they did play Ferris State and they beat them.
Oh, so it should be 1-0 then. Okay.
It actually should be 1-0.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, hold on. I'm going to change it so we can look at it correctly.
Fayetteville State was in the SR2 rankings,
That's
the official NCAA's SR2 rankings last week.
Okay. So that's more accurate the way it looks right now, or that is accurate. Okay. Very good, Ferg. So guess what? This is your job next week to make sure there are no errors. You can type them in.
That could be my error, but yeah.
No, it's all good. I typically believe it's mine. So let's go ahead and do we need to discuss anything further on Super Region 2? Are we ready to move to 3? Okay.
Well, let's talk about real briefly the West Georgia Newberry difference at the bottom.
Okay.
Chuck and I are speculating that, there's the initial thought that, okay, West Georgia beat Delta State. They only have 2 losses. Somehow they got to be up in this conversation. They had a really low strength of schedule coming into last week. So they're just kind of building back up to that 500 number for strength of schedule West Georgia is. And, the GSC hasn't looked like a fire-breathing dragon this year. I think most would probably agree with that. So they have not their wins over 500 or better are only 1-1 right now. So they're not coming into this conversation with a whole lot more other than that big win over Delta State. And Newberry is very similar to how they look on paper. So I could see Newberry being on that 10 line also. But Chuck and I just kind of figured that West Georgia, maybe the team that they have such a good win with Delta there. If all things are equal, give them credit for it in that spot.
Yeah.
I think you made a really good point about the Gulf South, because the Gulf South normally has SOS that's jumping off the page, and that's just not the case this year.
Exactly.
All right. One thing to address that's in the comments that would be more awkward to address later, but there's a lot of discussion about Chowan. If they were to win the CIAA championship, there's no pathway for Chowan with 3 losses to get into this discussion, is there? I mean, go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
I don't think so. I don't think so because I was going to say I don't think so because even if they win and that cancels out the Fayetteville State loss that they took earlier, this is kind of why I write in my columns at the beginning of every year as to how important out of conference games are. And losing to Barton, losing to Tusculum, that's having a really nice season, is just so painful to have these discussions and see them kind of on the outside. It's the same thing with Fayetteville State, because yes, they did beat UNC Pembroke, who's 5-5, but losing to Wingate hurts here. And it's just the CIAA, and in particular, when now the North is having to play more of the South teams that just haven't performed in recent years, you got to win out of conference games to compensate for the poor performers at the bottom tier of the conference now. So it's just really tough even to see Fayetteville State getting in. It's possible if some of these but things have to break a certain way. But Chowan with three losses, it just hurts.
Yeah, there's just
somebody said in the comments that Chowan's better than Mars Hill and Fort Valley, and hey, at this point of the season, maybe that's true. But the problem is, you have to look at the season in totality. And one of the things that the committee is able to look at is results against common opponents. So my response to that would be, you need to go back and look at Chowan's first 2 games of the season, because they lost to 2 teams that Mars Hill has defeated. So that gets factored into this.
Sure.
All right. Are we good on Super Region 2 then?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go ahead and we'll move to Super Region 3. All right. Again, not much happened in Super Region 3 last week, but 1 through 7 are Grand Valley, Pitt State, Ferris State, Ouachita Baptist, Davenport, Truman State, and Indianapolis, 1 through 7. So, Tony, Davenport stays in as we thought they would. With only 1 loss, they stay in this. Things might get a little shaky for them, or any of the number of 2-loss teams after next week. But for right now, that's the way 1 through 7 looks.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess the thing to note about Davenport is last week their strength of schedule was it was in the I can't remember if it was 470s or 490s. So here they played Ferris, and look where it is this week, and they've got Grand Valley this Saturday. So their strength of schedule is going to end up being quite high, and certainly it's going to be higher than any of the other 2-loss teams that are going to be in the field, at least the ones from the GAC and the MIAA. The only exception is going to be the loser of the Truman-Indianapolis game. So I think that's going to be one of the interesting things to watch is to see what the committee chooses to do with the loser of that game, and does their resume qualify well enough versus what a 2-loss GAC or 2-loss MIAA team is going to do. But yeah, this last week was really benign. I mean, everybody on this list except for Davenport won their games. And so now you come into this week with a whole lot of potential stuff that can happen. Grand Valley still has to play Davenport, so that's going to be a difficult game for both of those schools. Truman and Indianapolis, only one of those teams can win. Harding and Emporia and Northwest, only one of those teams can win. Right. And then the one team that we don't see on this is a 2-loss or 8-2 Henderson State, and they've got the Battle of the Ravine against Ouachita. So what happens with that if Henderson manages to win that game? Where does Ouachita wind up, and does Henderson find a way to somehow sneak all the way from off of this list and potentially onto the 7 line if they win that game? There's a lot that's going on this Saturday, which is actually going to be pretty fun.
Right.
Tony, I think you brought up a really important piece with the Henderson thing. I realized while they're not on the page, they're almost a clone of what you see on 8, 9, and 10 from but the exception of their SOS is like 466 right now. So that's why they're on the 11 line. Yep. But they also have the biggest chance to kind of, jump into the higher group, because of the fact that all the other teams don't have a Ouachita Baptist to play. So, I mean, if they were to win that game against Ouachita, they would have a better win than any other team in that mix. Yep. And at the same time, they would also have the worst loss. So because they lost to a 4-6 Arkansas, Southern Arkansas team. So when we look at it, Henderson's kind of that one that's hard to figure because I mean they've got kind of a mixed bag of results. They would also have the win over Harding, so they would have 2 wins over teams that are regionally ranked, which would look pretty good when you look at that regional ranking column at the very moment. Now, Indy is the one that I find right now to be the one that could be kind of the spot where one of those 8, 9s, or 10s would have a shot. And the reason why is if we take a look, they've played one less game and will have a lower winning percentage than like a Truman, for example. And they play head-to-head. So if Indy were to lose, and they took a huge hit in SOS with that William Jewell game.
Yep.
So you take a look, they're now back down to earth with their SOS. It's going to get a little bit of a bump with Truman. But realistically, let's say the Northwest Emporia winner, they're going to end up with a 500 SOS and a 9-2 record. Also, when you get to the 500 or better, they're probably going to have 3 wins in that category, which starts to look favorable.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They're also going to have a win over against a regionally ranked opponent because one's going to beat the other, Northwest or Emporia. All of a sudden, you put that up against what Indy's got, and Indy, with 2 losses, their record against 500 or better is going to take a hit. They're going to be 0-1 against regionally ranked. All of a sudden, we start having a conversation where maybe Northwest Missouri State or Emporia might have a real angle here with a win, which is not what we've been looking at, in weeks past, guys. Chuck, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, a couple of things here is that it's kind of interesting that Harding is in 8th. So you would look at that and think, like, well, they don't need a whole lot of help to get in. Right. But I think that they're kind of stuck there. I think if somebody like Indianapolis loses, that they're probably the most vulnerable team here, taking a suck. I think they're more vulnerable than Truman State.
Well, so I'm going to bring in I'm sorry, Chuck. I want to bring in a comment from Inc. That I think might be valuable to this discussion right now. So that collective number would be just what 0.005 better than the 9-2 silo teams. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think there's a decent chance that the Emporia State Northwest Missouri winner jumps over Harding. There's a very decent chance that happens. So I just kind of find it interesting that Harding is seemingly right there on the cusp, but I think that they're in a vulnerable position. I don't like their chances a whole lot unless things get really crazy.
I think they've peaked, and I think at the same time, they don't have any way to improve themselves, Chuck, which is I think kind of what you're going at. I mean, because inescapably the winner of Emporia or Northwest will have a win over a ranked opponent, while Harding will not. Yeah. So I think that immediately puts them in a bad spot because everything else is going to look pretty equal.
I think the only bump that Harding's got a potential to get is, if I'm not mistaken, Arkansas Tech has got a 500 record going into this Saturday. That's the only part of their resume that Harding's got a chance to improve upon.
Sure. Now Davenport is interesting.
Well, Tony, let me interrupt. Matt. I'm sorry. Arkansas Tech is 5-5 now.
Yep.
So
5-6.
So they're
right. So they would be less.
No. But
when you throw out the result
against Harding won't count. That's a 5-5 win.
Right.
But it's got
the actual criteria is above 500.
No, well, that's what it reads. But in my discussions with folks that are involved in it, if as long as it's 500 or above, they count it.
That's funny because the numbers have been stating differently, but that's okay. Like in the worksheets. Yeah, no, it's no big deal. But in the worksheets, it's been in any case where like somebody was 2-2, they wouldn't show up in the results of the opponents in the worksheets, for instance. So, all right, no worries, keep going.
Yeah. You know what, Tony and I were kind of, I saw him talking about Davenport earlier. Is there a chance, Tony, do you think that Davenport could almost be protected by the fact that they beat Truman? So it's almost like they can only slide down. If Truman, let's say, wins, if they beat Indy, it's almost like Davenport can't slide any further to possibly, be under attack by Indy or Northwest Missouri State or others. You see maybe that possibility here because their SOS is only going to go up.
Well, yeah. So Truman and Davenport's strengths of schedule are going to both go up. The question is going to become is if Truman's resume really is identical, right, and they just sit barely above Davenport, would Davenport leapfrog them? Yeah, I suppose that's a possibility, but I think you're right on with it. I mean, if you look at it, 7-2, that strength of schedule is going to work its way up probably more into the 540s or 550s. Yeah, I think they've kind of insulated themselves in such a fashion that at the very least they probably won't fall out of the bracket. I'm just having a hard time seeing how that happens.
And it
It's
almost
like Colorado Mines.
Sure. Yeah, because it almost looks like 1 through 4 are almost set in stone now, meaning we know who's hosting in Super Region 3. Isn't that how you guys kind of look at this?
Well, I yes and no. But here are my caveats. A, Ouachita doesn't have a gimme. And B, the question becomes then, where does Ferris land? Because we've talked about this before. When it comes to the end of the season, when Pitt State and Ouachita, let's assume Ouachita wins and their strengths of schedule are identical. If Ferris's resume is better than one of them, is it not better than both? I mean, that's I don't know how do you reconcile that?
Sure.
Yeah, that's a fair question. Yeah, if it's better than one, is it better than both? But I think right now you see a pretty big disparity in Ferris's strength of schedule to Ouachita's, that they're getting that, but they're looking at the 7-1 versus 10-0, closer on strength of schedule with Pitt State and Ferris, that they're not quite comfortable yet. But we'll see after we play this week.
And so Pitt State's is going to come down a little bit. Ouachita's will go up. Ferris's will come down a little. They got Wayne State left, so they're not going to stay at 640, but they won't fall below 600.
Sure.
All right. Let's move on to Super Region 4, guys.
Do we have to?
Yes, we do. The mess that it is.
I've been waiting for this one.
Get your popcorn.
I had a hard time getting to 10 teams in this region.
Right?
Okay. All right. So 1 through 7, Angelo State, Colorado Mines, Minnesota State, Winona State, Wayne State, Nebraska, Bemidji State, and CSU Pueblo. So those would be your 7 playoff participants. If we would predict that would happen if the playoffs were to start next week. So obviously Angelo, pretty solid up there at number 1, but there could be a lot in play after that. Do you think?
Yeah. As we take a look at this here, Mines has got a pretty good, spot sitting at the 2. What I think may come up potentially here, and I mean, you can see, I almost kind of look at it as there's the top 4. Then because of strength of schedule and other stuff, there's a little separation. Then there's Wayne State kind of leading the charge in that back half with 5, 6. 5 and 6 are almost a match. Wayne and Bemidji. You look at them across, and they're almost identical. Then you run into the 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm going to revisit the top here in a moment, Brandon, but
okay.
I think the biggest thing probably is that 7 line, of course, because last team in.
Right.
And Pueblo, I mean, we had left them for dead early in the year when they had lost 3 games in a row, guys.
I thought Grand Valley left them for dead.
Well, I mean, they were 1-3. I mean,
1-3.
And they have won 6 straight. Okay. Now, Sioux Falls, which is on the 8 line currently. By the way, people in Sioux Falls right now are checking their glasses to make sure Sioux Falls is actually on the page right now, because I don't think they were expecting them to be after losing yesterday. But what happened, guys, is Kingsville and a bunch of others who could have gotten this 7 line lost. So that's why we still have some of these teams at the bottom that we do, frankly. But Sioux Falls, they were 7-0 that have now lost 3 in a row. So does the committee, because if you take a look at them, Pueblo and Sioux Falls, and you go left to right, they're almost the same until you start to get to performance indicators is higher for Sioux Falls by a little bit. And both of them have played regionally ranked opponents, and neither of them have been very successful. We think what may happen here is Pueblo, let's kind of look at a few different things. Pueblo would only be the second team from a conference other than the Northern Sun here, so you got Mines in already in the RMAC. It would probably be a better fit. And I know people don't want to hear that, but I think that may be an easier decision for the committee, if all things are equal, to put Pueblo in there, because of the fact you've already got 4 Northern Sun teams and everything looks very similar between these 2 ball clubs. One's won 6 in a row. The other one's lost 3 in a row. Okay. But what's going to happen this coming week is Pueblo's going to play Black Hills, which has a 6-3 record, and they're going to get a strength of schedule boost, whereas Sioux Falls plays Upper Iowa, who's got 1 win. I have a feeling, and this is why we're kind of moving Pueblo more up than Sioux Falls at this moment, is because it seems like this is a better decision, not better, easier decision for the committee going forward, to just have Pueblo on that 7 line, knowing that, they don't have to bump Sioux Falls off that 7 line, because Pueblo's going to have a 50 or 40 point SOS advantage after next week, with almost all these other, areas the same. So it's a really tough one here, but there's no guarantee that Pueblo wins at Black Hills, and Black Hills' strength of schedule is so low. They're at 422 right now, and they've played 1 less game. So they will not get in the conversation up far enough to get that 7 line in our estimation. But then, you also have Duluth and Augie afterwards, but Sioux Falls has beaten both of those teams. So I think both of those teams are kind of stuck as well behind USF. Okay.
Right.
Chuck, what other takes did you have, other than the long-winded version of me, Pueblo, and Sioux Falls?
Well, the bottom half of this region is very difficult, and there's a lot of head-to-head results that you need to try to put into play here and try to consider, and that's very difficult because they conflict with each other in some cases. So it's really going to be difficult to come up with a final list in this region, literally until all the games have been played. So the bottom half of this is really, really difficult. I think Pueblo at 7 is probably what we're going to see tomorrow. It's where I am projecting Pueblo to be, which again is just awesome because we did not think that they'd be in play after the first month of the season. They had the most difficult opening month of the season of any team in Division II. They came out of it pretty bruised, but look where they are right now.
Mm-hmm.
But a couple of other observations. I think Bemidji probably should be a little bit higher. And a couple other things I want to ask you about, Whit. So first of all, we felt that Minnesota State should have been 3 last week. They are not. Winona was 3. We think the committee needs to fix that mistake this week. I hope that they will do that. But the big thing I want you to talk about is the number 2 seed. It seems like Mines has that firmly locked down. We've been high on them for weeks. We've kind of thought, this looks like it's trending in this direction. They're probably going to lock down that too. But if you look at where Minnesota State is at and the opportunity that they have this coming week, is there an opportunity for the Mavs to actually jump up to that number 2 seed?
I think that situation becomes a little bit interesting. Mines plays a winless squad, so their SOS is going to take a dive. They're going to be, let's say, 550 when we're done with that. Minnesota State, their SOS is going to get a bump from having played Winona. So the SOS is going to get to where we're not going to look at it as maybe a measurable difference. And if that happens, things are in favor of Mankato, because they're going to notch another win. If they were to beat Winona, they're going to end up getting 5 wins over 500 or better. They would have, they would be 4-1 against regionally ranked or something like that. All of a sudden, that looks really good for them. Whereas Mines, they're 0-2 against regionally ranked, which is a huge difference. So I could see where Mankato, I could see a scenario here where it's not beyond the realm of possibility for Mankato to be on that 2 line. Matter of fact, I think it might really happen. Now, if Winona were to win out, Winona's got a little bit lower SOS than Mankato does, which is also why we think that Mankato needs to be on the 3 line this time. And I got to be honest with you, I thought the committee got it wrong last week, because it was not
they did. They did.
There was
not
a thing. Yeah, there was not one metric that we could find where Winona was more favorable than Mankato, if we're going to be really honest. So I think, Winona, if they were to win, I don't know if they're going to be able to quite pull that off and beat out Mines. I don't think they would care that much because at the worst they're on the 3 line and they get a home game. It's a really good game here. This Winona Mankato game. Don't get me wrong, but Mankato just has a little bit more up on them when you take a look left to right, whether it's PI over 500, all that stuff. Now the other kind of piece of this that I'm looking at is, Chuck, you mentioned. I've been saying for a long time I thought Bemidji was the best team in the Northern Sun. My thoughts haven't changed all season on that, even after they started off 0-2.
Bemidji has been doing something that's really, really hard to do with, and what they're doing is they are making you look good.
Oh,
because you have been saying this for the better part of a month that Bemidji's the best team in the Northern Sun, and they are making you look good on that.
But me looking good doesn't do them any good on the 6 or the 5 line, Chuck.
Maybe you haven't advocated well enough. I don't know. But yeah, so where do you think Bemidji slides in here? I think that they should be. I think when I swagged this morning, I had them at 4. Or maybe 5.
You mean when the playoffs start, or
today? Where would you put them today?
In terms of like how I think they really are?
No, just in the rankings. Do you have them at 6?
I do have them at 6 because of the fact that Wayne was ahead of them a week ago, and Wayne beat Sioux Falls, who's regionally ranked, while Bemidji beat Northern, who's not. So that's why I don't think Bemidji's going to get any love to jump Wayne State here. And I think to some extent those two teams, because the loser, Chuck, of Mankato and Winona is going to drop a few spots, right? They're still going to be in the playoffs. They should probably be on the 6 line, and you may have Wayne and Bemidji move up. And I could see a scenario where, because of Bemidji being such a geographic outpost and can't play against other conferences because they're so far away come playoffs, that I could see those two, one getting sent to the other, Chuck, whether it's Bemidji going to Wayne or vice versa.
Right.
I think they're almost locked in, frankly, because they never didn't play during the regular season. So it's not like it's a conference, a common, hey, they played you this year type thing.
Yep. Yeah. No, I think that's pretty spot on.
What you just mentioned, Bemidji going to Wayne, and you're talking about the distance. I think this might be a good opportunity now to bring up a point that we won't have time to address. Next Sunday's show is going to be a reaction to the actual selections, not a prediction of what they will be. So we've talked about it, hinted at it and touched on it a little bit, but 5 through 7 are just going to be what are considered unseeded teams. And they can go to any region that is that is justified with the cost savings when it comes to travel and flights. There's a 600-mile limit to I guess a $5.99 limit to bus travel. And last year, Nebraska Kearney went and played in Super Region 4, while Super Region 4 member Central Washington played in Super Region 3 because Central Washington was going to be a flight no matter where it went. Now, are there any scenarios that you could project if things play out like, in probable fashion next week, where we might see some flipping of regions, some swapping?
Yeah, I in me taking a 2-second look at this afternoon, because as we've talked about before, one team in can change the whole shooting match, and they're doing everything they can to avoid a flight here. The challenge that you're going to have is that Mines is not driving distance from anybody else but Colorado State Pueblo. So if Pueblo makes the field, I got a feeling they're making a drive to Golden.
I agree. That's the other thing about this, Quinn. I want to jump in with this for just a second. When we talk about the fact that 5, 6, and 7 are unseeded and could get moved around and could go to another region, that's very true and that's very exciting. But the other piece of that is that those teams could be paired with any 2, 3, or 4 in the same region. Whereas in the past, it was locked in who 7 and 2, who 7 was going to play, who 6 was going to play. That was locked in. It's not anymore. So they can move things around to minimize travel and minimize rematches from the regular season.
Yeah, and on top of that, so Chuck, if let's say, for example, if Sioux Falls makes it in instead of Pueblo, they're gonna have to fly somebody to Golden. And then it opens up to who they want to fly. Is there cost savings with somebody flying from a bigger market? All kinds of things could shake all that up. But, right now we think it's trending towards Pueblo being on that 7 line. And if that's the case, then you also then open it up to, if you look at the map in the middle of the country, guys, these teams are not right next door to each other, so you're probably looking at something like Bemidji going to Wayne. Then you could see some of that crossover happening with, I think we're trending towards maybe a Northwest or an Emporia getting in. So you could have one of those guys end up making a trip to Mankato, because look where Mankato's on the list, right? They got a host, right? Winona would fall back if Winona loses, and that's, once again, we're just playing who's favorites. Winona then makes a trip to Pitt. So this is some of those things that we're talking about to be able to stay within the geographic integrity they're wanting to. And then at the same time, you would have like a Truman going to Ouachita. And Ouachita could be open to potentially playing somebody in Super Region 2, given how far south they are. But then you run into other things like Davenport would then have to play Ferris. Well, would they really? You could have Davenport, for example. I mean, I look at the map, they could go play at Ashland, and you could send Slippery Rock over to Ferris. So, I mean, and guys, this is not us saying, hey, this is what's going to happen.
Right.
This is giving an example of some of the type of things that you may see in a week.
Right.
And don't be shocked if you do. They're not trying to mess with everything. They're doing everything they can to not have a flight. And I think, Brandon, this impacts Super Region 3 and 4 are almost kind of tied in together.
Agreed.
Because their geographic footprint. Whereas
Yeah.
Chuck, you give me your thoughts, but I don't think we're going to have to see any of this in SR1 or SR2 because the travel distances are so much less.
Yeah, it's not looking like that will come into play. It's there's some possibility there, but it's not looking like that's going to come into play.
So the only theoretical way it could really do that is if Indianapolis somehow, some weird situation. I agree with you guys that it doesn't look like it's going to happen, but that's like an outlier of Super Region 3, a very eastern outlier that could get involved with Super Region 1 maybe. And but otherwise it seems pretty isolated. So, all right. Anything else on Super Region 4? Are you sure? Because if we stop talking about this, we have to bring up the pick'em results.
I'm still going to get a bunch of messages from Sioux Falls, Duluth, and Augie people, whether we talk about it more or not. So,
okay, very good. Well, unfortunately, then, men, it is time to review last weekend's pick'em. As embarrassing as this is, it shows you why none of us are Jimmy the Greek. What did they say? Well, whatever. He makes predictions, and none of us vote on the Vegas line.
Wow, we did badly, didn't we?
Yes, it's pretty embarrassing. More embarrassing than me trying to explain it. I mean, 3-3 is our best. That's just not a good week.
I'm not last.
No, that's okay.
Chuck and Brandon, what do you have to say for yourselves? 1 game right out of 6?
Well,
I think my picks in my column were equally as bad. I think I had because I had like 10 or 12 in the column, and they were all bad.
Well, Chuck, I would personally like to thank you, or congratulate you on your consistency. That was a great job. You didn't give all your poor picks away on the show. You did it in the column too, and I can really appreciate that. So, all right, let's look at the undercard because there are some pretty good games this week, guys. Grand Valley is at Davenport, or I'm sorry, is that correct, Tony? Is it at Davenport?
It is at Davenport, yes.
All right. Does anybody think Grand Valley is going to make the long trek to Davenport?
I was going to say, isn't that just another home game for Grand Valley?
It's like what?
I wouldn't go that far, but to my knowledge, this is the only away game where they don't go and stay overnight ahead of time.
Well, it's what? It's like what? 25 minutes?
From Allendale to it's probably closer to 40. If you're
okay.
And all that kind of stuff. But I mean,
Gotcha.
It's still all Metro Grand Rapids, basically.
Well, apparently Bob Eblin doesn't drive their bus because I believe that it was about 25 minutes for us getting around there. So, in any case, we think Grand Valley would win that one. CSU Pueblo against Black Hills. No matter the outcome, obviously, we think CSU Pueblo would win, and that's a great record for Black Hills.
I'll give him a chance.
They came on.
Yeah, I'll give him a chance. I think Pueblo wins, especially with a potential playoff bid in the line. I think they win, but I give Black Hills a chance here.
A quick side note to that, Brandon, is if you take a look at the coaching staff at Black Hills State, they've got some guys on staff there who were on staff with USF 5 years ago. And it would be one of those things where, USF's going, hey, do us a little favor here,
Right, exactly. So, all right, Ouachita Baptist and Henderson State, the Battle of the Ravine. Ouachita's the favorite, but Henderson pulling the upset, not even close to being, outside of the realm of possibility.
Yep.
Okay. Kutztown will play Slippery Rock. Slippery Rock, I think all of us would expect the Rock to win that one and be playing pretty well heading into the playoffs. Minnesota Duluth hosts Northern State. Is that a closer game than we would think with?
Northern State's a very good defense. Bemidji wasn't prolific against them this last Saturday, but Bemidji's more complete this year than they were a year ago, and they were able to just control the action. I think that's a pretty close football game, but I still think Duluth is just playing better overall.
Gotcha. Well, it's more of a national name than Northern. That's why I was curious about that. So,
sure.
And Tuskegee will face Benedict in the SIAC championship. This is Benedict's best season ever. Tuskegee's historically, I think, the best team in the SIAC. And certainly in the D2Football.com era, they have been. But Benedict's got to be favored in this one, Chris.
Yeah, I would think so. And it's been an amazing turnaround for Tuskegee after the last couple of seasons that they've had to endure. I think that, as Benedict gets into this game and then into the playoffs, they're just in uncharted waters for where their program has historically been. So, I wouldn't say that Tuskegee certainly didn't have a chance, but man, that game against Miles, I know that's a bit of a rivalry game with the coach moving over, but that's a little scary to me.
Yes,
and I think that Benedict is just going to sort of manhandle them a little bit.
Not so fast. I'll give you a little closer. Not so fast. Reginald Ruffin, the head coach at Tuskegee, it's his first year there. He won 4 SIAC championships in 9 years at Miles. He knows how to win this game. He knows what it takes to win a championship. I give them a very good chance to pull the upset in this game.
Ooh,
I'm with you on that, Chuck. I think this game's going to be closer than people think it's going to be, only because of what you just said. Reggie Ruffin knows what it takes to win these games, and he's going to have Tuskegee prepared. It should be a pretty good game.
Interesting. All right. One little side note to all this. I'm going to pull that down, guys. A little side note to this. I saw the video of New Tuskegee. Tuskegee played their first home game in their actual stadium this past weekend. And there was also like a locker room reveal. And I cannot tell you how much joy I get out of Division II players getting excited about facility improvements. It's not like Alabama or LSU or anywhere where they're spending $100 million on every facility. A $1 million improvement at our level is huge, and I get so much joy out of the kids seeing their new locker room and their new training facility. It's
Tuskegee homecoming is a bucket list game for me.
Is it?
Without a doubt. Yeah, that is a bucket list game for me. I would love to see that someday.
I would love to see you check under the shed.
I don't think I have the dance moves to keep up for under the shed, Chris. But
we'll be the judge of that. Let's see what you got right now, Chuck.
If you've ever seen some photos or videos from like Tuskegee homecoming, like that bowl is just absolutely packed. It's just looks awesome.
Yep. All right. Let's go ahead and look at the pick'em this week. Northwest Missouri will play at Emporia State, Truman State at Indianapolis, Shepherd at IUP, PSAC championship game in that one. Chowan is at Fayetteville State. That's the CIAA championship game. Mars Hill will play Newberry in the SAC championship game. And Winona State will end the season with Minnesota State. We'll take them in order. Since Devin's not here, that's not going to be a problem with that one. Let's go ahead and start with Chuck, Northwest and Emporia State.
Ooh, tough one. I'm going to go Emporia State.
Okay. And Devin is not here. He's going to send in his picks. Justin, what do you have?
I'm going to take Northwest in this one.
Okay. Chris.
I'm going to go with Emporia.
Okay. Whit.
I'm last.
You're last. I'm a graduate. Okay. I'll go first then. This is the best. Emporia State has not beaten Northwest Missouri State since 1994. But I think this is their best opportunity to do so. Even better than when they made the playoffs in like 2015 in that era. Having said that, I believe Northwest will win on the road. Okay, Whit, now go.
Well, we've kind of gone through this, Brandon, where each week we're like, yeah, it looks like, the winner of this game's got a 10% chance. Now they got a 30% chance.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with this whole thing with, Indy potentially, have a one less game and all this other stuff, not only am I looking potentially at, I love Northwest in this game. I think they just have it on Emporia State, and they have for a long time. But, you take a look, guys, and it's like, okay, Northwest isn't just going to potentially then make it in on the 7 line, but then they probably get shipped on over to Super Region 3, and they don't need, or from Super Region 3 to 4, and then they don't need to play Ferris. They don't need to play Grand Valley and all that. So Northwest went from having like a 2% chance to now maybe being shipped over to Super Region 4, which I'm sure they would love that idea given what's in their Super Region. I mean, it's like the guy who falls down a manhole backwards into the arms of Brooke Shields or something. I mean, they couldn't have lucked into this any better, I think. And I think that's kind of where we're heading with Northwest.
Is there a pick coming here?
You're telling us the fix is already in.
I'm not saying a fix. I'm just saying that this is how things kind of broke out.
All right. And Tony, if you were going to pick a winner, who would you pick?
Yeah, I struggle with the whole 1994 thing and people just having numbers, but I don't know, for some reason I'm rolling with Emporia in this one.
Very
I don't
good.
know why. I just think it's
like I said, it's their best chance. They have a great quarterback this year. They're really throwing the ball well. Northwest weakness on the defensive side is in the secondary. That's why it's an exciting game.
That's a fair point.
So, all right, let's go ahead and move on. Truman State and Indy. Justin, we'll go first.
Yeah, I've rode with Indy all year, and they haven't let me down yet, so I'm going to stay with Indy.
Okay. And Ferg?
Indianapolis.
Okay. Matt?
With Toriano Clinton sitting out the last handful of games with a foot injury and their starting quarterback as well, I think that Indy's had a little bit more risk, and Truman's playing great football right now. I got Truman.
As somebody who grew up about 30 minutes from Kirksville, Missouri, I have Truman State as well. And it's more than just a bias pick. I actually think they'll win. Chuck, go ahead.
I like Truman by a couple scores here. Indy has done a great job overcoming the absence of Toriano Clinton and their starting quarterback, Connor Kennett. But you're going to need all your dudes for this game because Truman State is really good. And I love that Indy's had some guys that have stepped up and played really, really well. But I think Truman State's rolling, and I like them in this game.
Okay. All right. Game 3, Shepherd at IUP. Let's go ahead. Justin, go ahead and start again so that Chuck can handle that last since he lives in the middle of the PSAC.
So this one's an intriguing game to me, and it's kind of a coin flip, but I'm going to take Shepherd in this one.
Okay. Chris?
Cardiac Rams, because something's going to happen, and Bajent's probably going to throw 75 yards to win the game last play or something.
Fair enough. Whit.
I don't know if Shepherd's played many teams this year, this kind of quality of IUP, and that's not a dig on Shepherd. It's just kind of how things have worked out. I think IUP has been a little more battle tested. I like IUP in this one.
Okay. I like the Rams in this one. I'm going to pick Shepherd. And Chuck, you can go last.
Well, I think you have good reasons for picking IUP in this spot. I think that they are a little bit more battle tested, and I'm convinced that Shepherd is a very good football team. I don't know how good they are because the rest of the PSAC East is just not good at all right now, which is kind of shocking when you look at the history of some of those programs, but it's just not a good division right now. And Shepherd's just kind of, mauled their way through that division other than one very tough outing with Kutztown. But I'm going to go with the Rams here. I just think that they have so many different ways that they can beat you, and I love how they're able to win close games. So I'm going to go with Shepherd.
Okay.
Chuck kind of swerved us on that one. You see what he did there? He set us up a little bit.
That's the way the greats do it, man. Next game, Chowan at Fayetteville State. Matt, you're going to select first.
Well, they had a quarterback last year. What was his last name?
Which one?
Witt.
Yes. Chowan's been playing great lately. I have them staying hot and winning this one.
Okay. I will go with Chowan as well, especially since it'll be motivation. But I think that's the right pick of that one. Chuck.
I agree with what you guys said, but at some point, Fayetteville State has to win this game. So may as well be this year. I will go with the Broncos.
Okay. Justin.
I'm gonna take Chowan in this one.
Okay. And Chris.
Oh my gosh, this game is so hard to pick. I don't know what to do. Well, this is a rematch. Week 5 that Chowan went to Fayetteville State and won 13-10. Chowan racked up the yards, but had just all kinds of turnovers. And, both teams have young quarterbacks that have sort of guided their offense. Chowan has a better offense. Fayetteville State has the better defense. But in terms of the most complete team, I think it's Chowan. And I know that I'm going to get a lot of issues in my Twitter feed at some point. But I think Chowan is probably going to be the pick. And it just hurts because this is Fayetteville State trying 5 times in a row to win the CIAA championship game. If they can't do it this time, they just need to move to the north and just we need to do something different at this point.
Well, you probably deserve the bad mentions in your Twitter feed. Hey, Tony, unmute yourself because I skipped you a couple times. First of all, who you got in this Chowan Fayetteville State game?
I'm going with Chowan. I agree with Chris. They've been the more complete team, especially of late.
What about the PSAC championship? Who you got?
Man, I am clueless on that one. Not in that I don't know a lot about those teams.
Right.
I just couldn't begin to tell you who I would take.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to gamble on IUP on that.
Okay. And then what about what's essentially the GLVC championship game with Truman and Indianapolis?
Yeah, I think even if Toriano Clinton was available to play, I just think Truman's on a roll right now. And I just don't see UIndy putting up enough offense.
Okay. All right. Game 5. Sorry to miss you, Tony. Again, I'm not smart enough to do 2 things at once. And if your name's not on the list, I just breeze right over it. Mars Hill is at Newberry, and we're going to start with Chris on this one.
This falls into the what do you really do with Newberry here? Because they on paper they should win this game, right? But they could just come out so ice cold, and what do you really do? I after last week, and I picked Newberry last week. I was the only one to pick Newberry last week to win. I just want to throw that out there, and I'm going to ride with them again. I'm going to dance with wolves on this one.
All right.
Well,
Whit.
I want to take Mars Hill here. I did take him last week, by the way, which is what tied me for the lead at 3-3, which is probably not a lot to brag about. Yeah. Newberry winning here would be the Newberry thing to do to kind of mess up what we think is going to be a clearer picture. So I think Newberry is going to win here. And all of a sudden, they are probably going to get thrust into the conversation for possibly getting close to that 7 line. So we'll see, and I'm taking Newberry.
I honestly, I feel for you, Chuck and Justin, because I've been so, hurt by Newberry and my inability to predict what they're going to do. It's like an ego blow. I'm going to go, and I'm going to say not the ghost, but the spirit of Jonas Randolph returns. I'm going to pick Mars Hill for the upset. So, all right, Chuck, you'll be next.
A lot of things rattling around in my brain on this one, and one of them is in the same Week 11 game last year, Mars Hill had to go play at Wingate, and Mars Hill was in a really great spot to make the playoffs, and they blew it. They just got outplayed. They looked horrible, and they blew their opportunity. This is a long road trip for them. For teams in the northern Son of the Armac, it wouldn't even be a one stopper. But this is one of the longer. This is one of the longer road trips that they make. Newberry can be a very, very difficult place to play, especially when they're playing well. So I think this is just kind of a tough spot. I actually think Mars Hill is the more consistent football team. And I got to give Justin a credit for this talking point. Mars Hill is really, really good at maximizing what they do well. So I won't go into all that, but there's a couple things Mars Hill does very well, and they're excellent at maximizing those things. Those could be some mismatches for Newberry. But all that said, I just like the way this is lining up for Newberry, and I'm going to take them at home.
Okay. And Justin, you get to pick last.
So yeah, this one is an interesting game, right? Because obviously you go to Newberry, and that's the Boneyard. It's a tough place to play, and you look at Newberry, and offensively they're explosive, right? You've got Dre Harris, you've got Mario Anderson, you have Des Kitchings, and they're pretty athletic on defense as well. And so they're a tough out. You look at Mars Hill, they have the ability to run the football. They can control the clock. They have the ability to play action and take deep shots down the field with the receivers outside. And then you look at their defense. They get after the passer. They're able to shut down the run, get in the passing lanes. They do a great job right there. If they can figure out a way to bottle up Mario Anderson and Dre Harris, I think Mars Hill is going to have a really, really good chance in this one to win this game. And likewise, if Newberry is able to hit those big plays, because we saw the time of possession last week wasn't a big deal for Newberry. If they're able to hit those big plays, it could very easily go that way. And we talked about it's so hard to really gather what we think about Newberry. But all that being said, and I think there's one more underlying fact that nobody's ever going to talk about, and this may be the first time ever. This game is a battle of two of the wily old silver foxes with mullets in the South Atlantic Conference. Both Tim Clifton and Todd Knight rock the mullet. So I think this may be the first time we've ever seen that. But that being said, I'm gonna take Mars Hill in this one, and Coach Clifton is gonna figure out a way to get it done on the road at Newberry.
All right, Tony, who would you pick?
So I think I'm going with Mars Hill in this one. And again, I think it's just because this strikes me as a situation where Newberry's at home. Yeah, they've got, probably better sets of players. And Justin did a great job of kind of, talking about some of them. It just strikes me as this is the type of place where they're the one who's going to stumble this year, like Mars Hill did last year.
All right. And our last game this week is Winona State at Minnesota State. I will pick first in this one so that Whit can pick last. I think it's been a phenomenal season by Winona State, and I think they've exceeded any expectations that we had for them. Maybe the Mavericks at Minnesota State have done the same thing. They're the hottest team in the Northern Sun, and I'm going to pick them to win this game. Okay. Chuck, please go next.
Second everything that you said there about both of these teams, but I think Minnesota State is just a team that's been getting better and better as the season has gone on. I like the Mavs.
Okay. Justin.
I'm going to take Winona State in this one.
All right. Chris.
I'm Mankato. I think
Okay.
Mankato's got it.
All right. And Whit.
Winona is hard to pick against right now, but Mankato is red hot. And seeing them in person, I think they have the ability to be a little bit more dynamic offensively. Wouldn't surprise me at all if Winona were to beat them. Winona is doing a great job of getting to the ball very quickly on defense. And they're great on special teams. I'm going to take Mankato in a close game.
Okay. And Tony.
Yeah, Mankato.
Okay, very good. That's what I figured. All right, guys. That will be interesting. So a great week to end the regular season. Just a reminder, I'm going to go ahead and pull this down, guys. That next week we will react to the selections. We won't be able to obviously predict them because that would be we'd have to do that on Saturday night, but we'll react to the predictions, react to the selections. Again, during the week, check out the columnists. They break down the teams and the races in their own conference, and we provide a different perspective. Obviously, those of you watching the show have a different perspective than some of your less educated friends who don't necessarily watch our show, and they only know their particular team. And you can really get a great look at a conference by reading the columnist, or in some cases, listening. On game days, and this is especially true this week, you can access our scoreboard. You can score it by top 25, by conference, by super region, which is what a lot of people are using in the last 4 weeks of the regular season, or you can sort by all if you're one of the savages out there. And again, we have the biggest collection of the best D2 fans on the country on our message board. A lot of them are in the chat, both on YouTube and Facebook that you see tonight. And just be aware, if you're watching this on Twitter, we can't see or respond to any tweets that you send. So if you want to interact, it has to be on Facebook or YouTube. Having said that, I also want to thank Inkblot Sports, Flow Sports, Wood TV8, and Dakota News Now for what we were able to use in our show today. It's the time when we start answering questions or responding to comments. Let's go ahead and get that started. I think that Justin and Chuck would back this up. There'd be no way you'd bet on D2 real money. Or excuse me, on Newberry real money.
Yeah.
Not at all.
I hope people understand, though, that I love Newberry College. I went there so many times in the years that I lived in Charlotte and went to games. It's such a fun place to go. The people always treated me so well there, and they really value what we do here. So nothing but love for the people at Newberry.
And it's a great program, great staff, great people. It really is. But just when you try to figure it out, somebody can figure it out, let us know. Because
hey, I've said that about Hillsdale for 15 years. Look at their last 5 weeks.
Exactly. All right. I like this comment. I've never seen a guy get beaten to the ground like Jimmy T did. We talked about it last week, and get up and keep fighting. And, as you get older, you get more impressed with that stuff than you do with winning or greatness, just the ability to get back up. At least that's the way I feel about things. So we're going to address that last. Wet you are, Lee Corso, according to Bradley. You even have the headgear. You don't have the bad language that sometimes comes out, but
not on live show. But
actually, I love Lee Corso, and I think he gets a lot of gruff. But I look forward on Saturday mornings to seeing Kirk Herbstreit going and finding him pre-show, and he'll come sit next to him, and they're sitting at a table, and they'll say, "Well, why are you picking this guy?" And he turns and goes, "It's show business, sweetheart." I think he's great. So,
all right. I want to address this one because it's part of the rant that I had last week. Bajent doesn't play good in bad weather and big games. That is absolutely false. The reason that X24 thinks that is because he's a Ferris fan and saw him play at Ferris. Nobody was beating Ferris last year. The one team that could have been Grand Valley. That was the one team. Okay. Yeah. And it wouldn't have mattered. It wouldn't have mattered what happened. I saw the game and I thought Bajent played extremely well, made some throws that nobody else could make in those bad situations. And if you were to put Bajent on another team, it might have flipped it where maybe they could beat Ferris, but nonetheless, the way they were constructed last year, that wasn't going to happen. So I do not think that Bajent plays poorly in big games, especially when you look at.
There's an overwhelming amount of evidence to say that comment is. Sorry, I know this is a family show. Yeah. Bullshit.
Okay.
Go watch some of the
playoff games that he win.
Go watch some of the Super Region 1 playoff games.
Right. That's exactly what I. Yeah.
And I just want to throw out there too that okay, it's Super Region 1, so you want to give flack to that. But
Mhm.
think about the plays that were made at the end of those games last year. I mean, those were just elite plays that were made. So, I mean, discount it all you want to, but we're not agreeing with you.
Right, exactly. Well, it's all good anyway. And
I mean,
now it's
who made bigger plays in the playoffs?
right. That's exactly right. I mean, well, Jared Bernhardt
I
maybe.
said Jared Bernhardt, and
Right.
he was, one of the best players around, and he was clearly on the best team.
I mean, I would have gotten 5 yards a clip if I was running behind that line. Look at me.
All right. Now,
Spelled.
more
We would have been
accurately,
running power, and we would have followed it up by power again.
more accurately, you'd have been part of that line. All right. So
We're going to sweep with. Nope, we're going power.
all right. Now, this is going to look like I'm picking on you, X24, and that is because I am. All right. So, it says you guys
Let's
act
not
like
confuse things at all.
yes. You guys act like Ferris didn't dominate that game for 3 1/4 quarters. All right. Great.
Game.
The Grand Valley Ferris game this year. They're talking about it. All right. Having said that, then he followed it up with this. No excuses. Grand Valley outplayed us in the fourth. So I hate this where somebody says, yeah, we had the game up until the final 10 minutes when they scored 21 to beat us. This is the way you need to think of it. Grand Valley so dominated your team in the last part of the fourth quarter that's all they needed to beat you after you'd done that. That's how badly they dominated you. Anyway, I've always hated that. We had control of the game until they scored 21 to beat us.
Go back to the beginning of the show and look at the Delta State West Georgia game we talked
That's
about.
exactly where I was going with that.
Yeah.
Brandon, we need you get you a little red ass right now. Keep going.
I think that's about it. Hey, if maybe somebody could post something that'll make me angry, but
Come on, somebody fire him up a little bit.
The things that they think will anger me don't. It's all the idiosyncrasies that do. This will be a fun one. All right, and these are kind of ending with the Battle of the Ravine. Okay, so Bradley says, "Who are your favorite play-by-play guys?" And I recently watched Ouachita play, and I love the energy of their announce team. We get a kick out of it too.
I get you, Bradley. First of all, Rex Nelson, who calls the games for Ouachita, is a treasure.
Mm-hmm.
If you're watching a Ouachita game as a supporter of the opposing team, he's probably going to wear thin on you real quick.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're watching that as an impartial viewer or a Ouachita fan, it's just such a fun experience. Listening to Rex call the game, he's really into it. He knows what's going on. Energy. He knows who all the players are. He sounds like a combination of Gus Johnson and Boss Hogg calling the game. It's awesome. And they use a 3-man booth, and he does this great job of kind of, directing traffic and getting the other guys to throw in their commentaries. It almost sounds like it's rehearsed the way they do this. They do a great job. I love it.
So, all right. Agreed. So we're going to end, it looks like, unless somebody does something to anger me.
Well, actually, Brandon, I got something here on my own chat. Somebody sent me a message.
Yeah, okay.
Brandon, are you going to miss the fact that Harding and Northwest won't play in the playoffs this year?
Unbelievable. You have no clue that you have no clue how much I'm going to miss that. So, all right. So let's look at this one. If you ever have a chance to catch a Battle of the Ravine between Ouachita and Henderson, it's a small college gym. Only a 2-lane highway separates them, and the stadiums are with eye shot of each other. I'll tell you about my experience. Bob Eblin, first of all, I poo-pooed it because, I'm from, the middle of the MIAA, and nothing can touch Northwest and Pitt or whatever, I went, and it was awesome. Like I've told the story many times. They have everything in town, every statue, every signage has plastic over it because they will graffiti it if it's not the other school. When we were there, we wanted to check out, and we got there at night. We wanted to check out the new Ouachita Stadium. So we're driving around it, and security was right behind the stadium, and they'd just come and find us and follow us what we're doing. Then once we were a comfortable distance, they'd go back to where we were. We came back later, did the same thing. And their AD, David Sharp, is a good dude. He's like, you should have called me. I would have shown you the stadium. But I know that might sound bad that you think graffiti is awesome, or at least the threat of graffiti is awesome. And legitimately, it's right. There's just a 2-lane highway, and it's an Arkansas, Missouri 2-lane highway, which means it doesn't have any shoulders either. So it's really just 2 lanes of asphalt.
Yep.
And that's the difference between the two schools. And it is legit as legit gets in terms of a rivalry. And I had so much fun when I went down there and watched that.
I've never been there for the game, but I have been to Arkadelphia. I had to go out to Little Rock for business a couple of years ago. I drove down to Arkadelphia and I saw both schools. You can stand in one stadium and look across the street and see the other stadium. They literally are that close. They can dress in their home locker room and walk across the street. When you drive through, or if you're walking around, like, you literally can't tell which campus is which. They're literally right on top of each other. So it's a pretty amazing layout that they have there.
Well, and anybody who wants to get a little bit more insight into that, especially as we're on the cusp of that game happening this weekend. In 2019, Sports Illustrated did a killer article on it. You can Google it and find it online. I've read that several times just because it's so entertaining to see how, and they actually interview Rex, the play-by-play guy, as a part of the article. It's a great read, and I recommend anybody go check it out. If you like D2 football, you got to read it. It's awesome.
Agreed. So, and as the same individual says, the signs are now covered and the lights are on at both stadiums beginning tonight. That is fun.
Love it.
All right.
It's a 6-hour drive where I'm going to the CRW championship game, and it's the same 6 hours to Arkadelphia, so it's kind of tempting.
Well, you would not be disappointed, Ferg. I would be willing to bet that. So which one of y'all are coming to Arkadelphia? Apparently it's going to be Ferg. If you want any of the rest of us, it's going to take a big donation to the website, because we're going to have to fly, because I've driven from Kansas City to Arkadelphia, and there is no way to get there after you hit the border. It is insanely inconvenient and curvy, and you're on the edge of your seat a lot of the time, especially if you're riding with Bob Evelyn. So that
it doesn't really get any better if you fly into Little Rock and then drive. You're still kind of Dukes of Hazzard touring down there to Arkadelphia.
It's crazy how there's no convenient way to get there, at least from where I am. So I'm looking for some other comments. Yes, I did hear the call. I heard it on Twitter. Very exciting win for them. And yes, when the question was asked about radio guys, Eric, I did immediately think of Dick Nelson. Who is the guy at IUP? I can't remember his name?
Jack Benedict.
Yes, I love Jack Benedict. He was like a classic style announcer. I was a broadcasting major, wanted to do play-by-play on the radio. So this is something that really hits me, is like something I would have paid attention to me. But
Jack's done well over 500 games at IUP. Yeah,
gotcha.
he's a pro.
Yep, and Matt is a pro in Sioux Falls. He's done well over 500 buffets. And with that, guys, we are going.
Was I buffering for a moment? Did I miss something?
Love you, Whit. Anyway, guys, that will do it for tonight on Inside D2 Football. One last reminder: next week, check us out. We will be recapping the selections next week, and look forward to a great Week 10 in Division II football. We will all see you then. Thanks for watching.